Hello, everyone. I'm in my closet. Do you like my closet, Amadea?
It is exquisite.
Love this closet. I just recently started recording in the closet because I found the audio is just so much better. I took the lead from some of my professional podcasting friends and said, you know what? We're just going to make the move into the closet. All right. So you are just, for those of you who don't know Amadea Morningstar, if you're in the world of Ayurveda, you should. So I'm just going to say that because you've been a seminal voice, I would say, in the modern Ayurveda movement for many a decade. And you're just releasing this book on healing drinks. And I was really excited about this book because one of the things that I've really noticed over time is like people are so much more apt to pop a supplement than to brew a bevy.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. And part of it has to do with how complex life is now. And so with increasing complexity, it's like Ayurveda's got to get simpler. And Ayurveda is all about opposites. And so what we need to do is settle down and get simpler, not get more complex. And there's a misconception that Ayurveda can be complicated. And yet if you look at something like one of the recipes in there is from Dr. Ladd, it's a cucumber milk. You just blend a half a cucumber with 1 cup of milk, a little bit of cardamom and a tiny bit of coconut sugar. And it's like amazing for calming heat. And it takes 5 minutes to make. So, and that's a traditional recipe, you know? So when I first started out, 3 or 4 years ago, when I was thinking about this book, I thought recipes have to be very simple. And they've also got to take at most 15 or 20 minutes, you know?
Right.
But now I would say I'm going for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
because
it's realistic.
It's the amount of time it takes for somebody to pop a pill, practically, you know?
Right.
And so you want to have something that's nourishing and prana-filled and easy and tasty and that works, you know? Yeah. So it's been fun. I mean, it's really been fun to try to come up with like, okay, so what's something that the average person could do that is simple?
Yeah, it's really like hacks, right? It's like, how do you hack something that, like, back in the day when we were closer to the land, we knew our plants, we were harvesting our roots, we were harvesting our berries, our twigs, right? And we actually knew what to do with them because our mother did it, and our grandmother did it, and our great-grandmother did it, and our great-great-grandmother did it, and our great-great-great-grandmother did it, right? To now, like, wait, my mother didn't do it. I'm not sure what my grandmother did. I have absolutely no idea what my great-grandmother did. So I have to learn it. And then I have to do it, and then I have to kind of bring it into a habit so that, like, oh, during the summer, I naturally gravitate towards these beverages that are going to reduce heat in my system. Yeah.
And yet we're also at the time right now, you know, in the kind of this transition in late summer, early fall, where we also it's a real invitation to key in on our own bodies. Because sometimes it's going to be really hot, sometimes it's going to be really cold, sometimes it's going to be wet, sometimes it's dry. So it's a real invitation to start meeting our doshas more directly, rather than just like, oh, this is supposed to be fall, so I should be eating this, you know? Because maybe where you are is 80 right now.
Oh yeah, like what is going on the planet right now? That's a very good call. Like now, actually, where we are, we have a smoke inversion happening from all the forest fires in Montana. The smoke's blown in, and I live in a valley surrounded by mountains, so the smoke is blocking the sun. So it's cooler. Yeah, it's fast. I mean, it's so fascinating. Yeah. It's like cooler. All this stuff was obviously predicted with global warming, but you know, the reality of it is like, yeah. The people that I'm working with now are just and I don't really work one-on-one with anyone, but it's like the moms in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right? Their kid, they're dried out. They don't know how to lubricate their sinuses. They don't know how to eat nourishing foods that lubricate their physiology. And so we're in this sort of like smoke-filled atmosphere, and they don't know how to moisturize their cells.
And also it's all about protection. So like the moms in the neighborhood need that protection of like some mist or something cooling. It's like, this year we've been lucky and we haven't had fires, but the years we have, it's like so wearing and drying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then the kids get this sort of like post-reactive mucus, and they get their lymphatics get dried out, and then they get I mean, you know, the whole...
Yeah.
The racket.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about beverages as a medium, like the whole concept of Anupana and delivering nutrients, delivering specific qualities, delivering these like very charismatic plants into our physiology via a liquid medium.
Yeah. So for example, one charismatic plant is aloe vera.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, especially when you think about smoke, fire, and, poor little dried up.
I'm an addict. I am an addict. I love.
Yeah.
She is my
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the phrase charismatic plants, and how we introduce these charismatic plants into our everyday life varies from person to person. And if you're in your early 20s, you may do something different than somebody in their late 80s. And yet Ayurveda is there for everybody. And those beverages can deliver high quality nutrition at any age. So part of what I've been excited about is a lot of my clients and folks in my community, some of them don't do well with protein powders, and yet they love shakes. They want to have shakes, and yet maybe they get gassy with protein powders. And that was driving me wild because I don't have a whole lot of affinity for it, and yet some people do really well with them. And I thought, well, how else can we get a good quality protein into a drink without using all this processed stuff? Yeah. And I started doing soaks. And so soaking seeds, whether, the most affordable are sesame and sunflower, but the omega-3 rich ones, like chia or flax or hemp, like hemp is 5 grams protein per tablespoon. So you just stick something in the fridge with, like say a couple tablespoons of hemp with a half a cup of water overnight. And then you just toss it into your smoothie, whether that's some fresh berries, almond milk, a little bit of cardamom or cinnamon, and 5 minutes and you got a drink.
Let's talk about that soaking and the absorbability and the, what's actually happening in soaking, because a lot of people don't understand why we soak.
So yes, so soaking makes protein and amino acids more available, more digestible, and more likely to get into rasa, the plasma, which is going to nourish us and juice us up. Rasa literally is it's taste, flavor, it's the liquid part of our blood, and it's the nourishment for all the other tissues, all the other dhatus. And so something like soaking, literally we're already plumping food up and giving it extra moisture so that when it comes in, it's not like our GI tract and our blood is shocked. It's like, oh, it's already moist and delicious, kind of like the plasma. So there's an affinity and a resonance.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And I just want to bring up the part of enzyme inhibitors too. Like a lot of seeds and a lot of grains have these, the plant actually grows a protective mechanism to keep animals from over harvesting it. And that's what gives people the indigestion is from, whether it's the bloating or gas from not soaking stuff is, well, your body doesn't know what to do with those enzyme inhibitors.
Yeah. Yeah, and certain nuts and seeds, if you soak them, you need to discard the water. Like almonds, almond milk is like so building for ojas and protective of our overall immunity. And yet, once you soak some almonds, you want to drain those almonds and start out with fresh water when you're making your almond milk or your almond shake. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll let you keep going on the healing power of beverages because I mean I know even. For myself, like I can just get on a mostly drinking water kick and I'm just getting nourished. I eat and I drink water, but then there's some things that it can get kind of boring to just drink water. And then we can miss these natural medicinal, seasonally effective, nourishing tonics that add variety. And go ahead.
Yeah. And actually I have one for you, Kate. I think this is, it's called True Toning Tea. It's a tonifying tea. What you do is you stick 1 teaspoon of True Solomon Seal root in 2 cups of water. You let it sit overnight, and then you drink it cold. It's a cold infusion, and you just sip on it. You can use it year-round. It's specifically used to tonify ligaments and muscles. And it like people take it before and after chiropractic.
How do you know I need ligament and muscle stuff? I totally do right now.
You've been working out, man. And that's it's like I can see you're doing a lot. So so it's it's cinchy. All you do is you put your teaspoon of this herb in like a glass jar. You just shake it up a little. You sit it on the shelf. The next morning you just strain it and you drink it. You can put it in your water bottle. And it tastes good. It's got this sweet, nutty flavor. It's an adaptogen. It's very friendly. Perfect.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I think about with terms of creating seasonal drinks and ease is digestives. So even if you've got a recipe that's only got 2 or 3 ingredients in it, there needs to be some kind of digestive to make friendly, to make nice. So just the way you soak seeds or nuts to be able to make them more absorbable and really get that nutrition right to your plasma, which also is going to help build ojas, your overall, vital cushion. There will be different times where we'll use different digestives. I was listening to your podcast with Dr. John Douillard, and I just loved what he was saying about cholagogues, and he was talking about clearing the liver, and using things like beet and apple and celery as a way to, juice as a way to clear the liver. And I was totally like, yes. And I thought about one of the healing drinks that I used in the spring was beet, carrot, and mint. And it was really simple. I mean, it was like so tasty. And the mint actually disperses vata. It calms and settles vata down. And it also cools out that kind of warm quality of the beet and the carrot. And the beet and the carrot are just, detoxing the liver like crazy. And it tastes good. And yet I noticed that, we were on a run, I did that juice a lot, spring through early summer. And then I was like, I don't want it anymore.
Yeah, you get done with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I didn't want to be cool. And it was weird because, it's still hot, but I found myself heading more for, I would use basil or ginger in a vegetable juice rather than, something cool like the mint. So sometimes you can have a very simple recipe and you'll just change out the spice, Cardamom's more cooling than cinnamon, or, there's different ways where you don't have to get flashy. It can be, you're just tracking with the seasons.
Well, and there's two comments on that. It's one is you're awakening your palate to choose, and this is how this is how it's always been. It's never been someone being like, you should do this. It's always been, there's been so much more connection to earth, connection to the seeds and the berries and the stalks and the roots, right? And then oh, I want this right now. So we've been able to self-attune and self-heal and self-medicate so much more so in this day and age when all these little supplements are sitting, these little plastic-like capsules sitting in plastic-like bottles sitting on shelves. Not right. We're so disconnected from palate. And once we get back attuned of oh, I'm over mint, it's time for basil. So that's comment 1. And then comment 2 is in basic Ayurvedic pharmacology. It's you always have a digestive. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what herbal formula you're building, you always bring a digestive into it. You always bring a carminative. You always bring something that's going to enable the compound that you're creating to actually assimilate and get deeper into the cells and often have balancing actions to the formula itself, right? Or enhancing actions. And so once we kind of get that, it helps us see that taking a single herb off a shelf is probably not as intelligent as an approach.
And also, so many of the herbs are so fun and tasty. So you might as well enjoy them. Something like cardamom, cinnamon, nutmeg, tulsi, ginger. All of those are just so flavorful, So why not have fun and let yourself taste them?
Yeah. Amen. So let's talk a little bit about, as people are in their 6th and 7th and 8th decade, let's talk about some nourishing beverages and some different tonics that you've created or that you're just noticing really are aces in your hole.
And there's a few recipes I'd love to give at the end. One of them is a black sesame seed. You still there?
No, we kind of zipped out there.
So there's a black sesame seed drink where you just soak up black sesame seeds, a little bit of hemp, and some water. In the morning, you just zip it up with honey and a bit of cardamom. And it's this thick, delicious vata calming shake that's, especially soothing for anybody that's needing to calm vata, which especially can be people who are, over 50.
Right. So people that are not sleeping well. So let's go through some of the symptoms that maybe it's they're not sleeping well. Maybe there's just increased anxiety. They're finding they're worrying more. Maybe they feel ungrounded. Maybe they're having feeling less nourished, the quality of their tissue is less potent.
And I'd say that that's a description of people across the board too. And you probably see that too. It's folks in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's
children in the neighborhood.
It's you don't have to be old to be stressed out, And Yeah. So part of that has to do with that. I was also really appreciative um, when you were talking with Kate O'Donnell. The two of you were so wonderful about, wait a minute, we've got to have these moments in nature. And that's a really fabulous way to both calm vata and also soothe pitta and kapha, balance kapha, because it's not all just through what we put in our mouths. And so I loved it because you were talking about doing foot baths, after yoga class, and it can be cool in the summer, but it can also be warm as we're heading toward fall. If somebody's got cold feet, it's like, thank God you've got some warm water. And similarly, Kate was talking about how she goes to a farmer's market and she just kind of bathes in the produce section. She just kind of picks up the vibes, and again, at any age, oftentimes I'm trying to lure people into nature in some way.
Yeah.
Because that's where the reset is.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's a healing drink. Sometimes it's like, wow, I just need to step outside, look at the sky, look at the trees, if hopefully there are some. And for me, I'm actually, my reset is I have a little retreat hut in the woods, and I go there on the weekend. And there's no, electronics. And I'm very lucky. Sometimes I only get 11 hours there. Sometimes it's 3 days. But it's like I can just feel myself settling down. And that circles around to melatonin. And like John Douillard was talking about how there's this reset you can do of your whole nervous system. He had people go out, he was talking about research where they took people out in the woods. They had no cell phones. They were just, with natural lighting for a whole week. And their melatonin levels recovered like 70%. Similarly, the research is indicating that electromagnetic fields can really depress melatonin levels. And people are pretty familiar with the idea, wow, I've got to turn off my cell phone at least an hour or two before I go to bed. And yet, if you can unplug your modem, that makes it even more soothing and more likely to create some more melatonin. Back to drinks, tart cherries are a rich source of melatonin. So one of the easy healing drinks is a cherry agua fresca. And so we just soak pitted tart cherries in like coconut water. Coconut water is so alkalizing. It's got all that magnesium, relaxing your muscles. And then you just put a little bit of nutmeg in it and you drink it before bedtime. And it's just like soothing, Very simple.
I want to try it. We have our local choke cherries are coming into season here. Do you have those too? Like they're everywhere in our ecosystem, and I find so few people actually use them. But they're incredible. Like once the weather gets a little bit colder and it really drives the sweetness into the fruit, right? It's like I just feel like they are the highest antioxidant available plant in our ecosystem. That's just like they're everywhere, and almost no one's eating them.
And so vibrant, so incredibly vibrant. I love the way you, like a year ago, you were highlighting, choke cherries, and I was like, go Kate, the place I grew up in the Midwest, there was a whole bank of choke cherries right, at the end of our backyard. So we did.
How did you use them? Yeah. So tell me, did you do any healing beverages with them, or
mostly we smeared them on the back of our pants. We were little, we were kids, we were goofing around in the trees, but we did like to make like choke cherry lemonade.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what I do with them now is I just put them in my blender on really a low setting to get the pits out. Then I strain it. So I put water in with the choke cherries. I run it for like a minute or two, and then I strain the pits out and keep everything else. And then I'll mix something else with it, or I'll add. They are quite tart, so adding something that's like a little bit sweet.
So what do you
licorice root? I can add like either a drop of stevia or licorice root powder or something like that. Yeah. And sometimes I just do it with a little bit of I have powdered thistle now because there's so much thistle here, and I just dry it in the spring when it's super vibrant, because I can pick about 5 pounds of thistle in about 30 seconds. Yeah. And then I just throw it in the dehydrator, and then I crunch it up into a powder in my Vitamix, and then I store it in a cold, dark place as a powder just for convenience sake. And then I'll use a little bit of that in the fall, and it just kind of helps clear out some of, some heat. But if it's dry here right now with the fires, I'll add some of the licorice root as a demulcent.
Yeah. Yeah, or even marshmallow root, would be another one. Yeah, but it's like so that's just like so soothing and so alive and so much prana. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you've got all this prana and all this nutrients.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this sort of bioavailability, because I know it was really good. Like one of my sort of like more mainstream course members, yoga health coach, posted in our forum this article, like this local article on all these different uses for dandelions. And we printed these t-shirts, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, that dandelions are the new kale. Have I sent you one of those yet?
No.
Oh, I'm sending you one.
You're
probably a small. I'm sending you a small one.
I'd be medium. I got medium. Big shoulders. It's the shoulders.
Perfect. Yeah. And and now I'm like, and so I responded to that on the forum of like, sweet, like just us talking about it incessantly, and a lot of gets other people talking about it, other people talking about it, gets us talking about it, and I've said I've wanted to print this T-shirt for the last 4 years that says thistle is the new dandelion, right? And I'm trying to rewild us as a culture, and I'm using the sort of like the narcissistic yoga culture of like self-care to the max of like, hey, let's wake up to our ecosystems and let's get more interconnected. So if I just look at like the two of these resources around my habitat, where I don't have to order an herb on the internet, I don't have to go to the store and get an herb that's imported from 2,000 miles away, if not 20,000 miles away, right? I can just look at like, hey, wow, there's choke cherries here. How do I use those? Oh, there's thistle here. How do I use that? There's service berries here. How do I use service berries? And getting really super curious about that stuff. And then all of a sudden what we find is like, oh, I'm caring for my ecosystem. It's like nourishing me. So I'm more likely to be protective of it. I'm more likely to advocate for it. I'm more likely to talk about it on the podcast. So I guess what I would love to know from you is, with like a lot of your drinks, a lot of the beverages, a lot of the herbs and stuff you use, like how much are you able to source locally?
It's a good question. And along those lines, I'd say the weeds. How I live is there's ordinary plants out there that are really nourishing, as you're highlighting, in terms of biodiversity. And what's in the weeds in my garden right now are things like amaranth, lamb's quarters, and spurge. And some of those I'm using more in solid foods, like the amaranth leaves and the lamb's quarters are great in pesto. I just pick off the leaves and I just put them into, a little bit of basil, some sunflower seeds, and miso, and you've got this yummy, plant-based pesto. Similarly, like spurge. I mean, spurge is like...
What is spurge? What are some of its other names? I'm like blanking here.
Darn, it's a low growing, it looks like a succulent. It's like going to town right now. It's a low growing, spreading, squishy succulent type plant that's about so big, and it's got tiny little yellow flowers when it starts to go to flower, but when it's kind of a light olive green, it's oh darn, I wish I don't know the Latin.
Okay, I'll post a picture on the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because so that is like, it's very rich in omega-3s. It's easy to put into like a stir fry. Yeah. So those things. I'll also I've been really playing with, like there's this cooling coconut green drink that I'm turning into. The next thing is like cleansing almonds, green drink. And I keep playing with different greens and seeing how they go. And right now, cilantro still is like the coolest, sweetest, friendliest. I've got a lot of arugula out there. And sometimes I'll put arugula in a drink and it'll be like amazing. There's this really simple, you just combine tulsi and arugula as a tea. We call it the Tulsi Queen. And you'd think, it's just, a little bit of tulsi powder and a whole bunch of, like a pot full of arugula. And it just tastes amazing. Especially like I was doing it a lot more in the spring, and now as, we head toward fall, the arugula's coming back and I can play with it again. So I've been really interested in combining like veggies and herbs in teas, so like veggie teas and also fruits in teas. So getting a little less conventional and like, in order to be a tea, it's got to have only herbs in it. Not necessarily. So like the tulsi and the arugula, like they're out there and they just taste so good. And all you do is just brew them up 5-10 minutes, and you've got this yummy drink. And interestingly enough, if you want,
and it's sweet. I mean, it sounds so much sweeter than just herbs, right? Because there's so much more with like a plant food that's not as intense. It doesn't have like the intense pungency or the intense dryness or bitterness of medicinal.
Yeah. Though arugula can be pretty intense as a pungent.
In Mexico when we get it, it's like I can only have like 5 leaves in a salad. It's so intense down there.
Yeah. And though it's interesting what if you put a tiny bit of honey, if you're somebody that uses honey, a little bit of honey in the Tulsi arugula, it brings out the qualities of the Tulsi, and it actually sends it straight to the respiratory system and the lungs too. So it's like really soothing recovery kind of drink,
That'd be so good for the people in the smoke season. Yeah.
So one thing I was also thinking about was cultural diversity. It's like we talk about, food diversity, crop diversity, microbiome diversity, and there's also cultural diversity. And we're in an interesting place right now where we've expanded a lot as a country, and now there's this contraction happening, which is really, to me, painful. And at the same time, cultural diversity is part of what creates richness in our lives. And here where I live, I'm in the Southwest. I live outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we've got 3 kind of major cultural groups. We've got Native American people who've been here for, 1,300 years plus. We've got Spanish people who, some families came like 500, 600 years ago. And then the third group is the Anglos, those of us who came in the last few hundred years, or in my case, 40 years. And because there's a lot of respect for diversity, there's a certain kind of juiciness that's present here. And I was talking to a friend, it's funny though, because we think about things in a little bit different way, and that I was talking to an Afghani friend last week, and she said, well, I'm an Anglo. And it's true, like if you're not a Native American or a Hispanic, then you're an Anglo. So if you're
imported.
So if you're Black, white, Asian, Afghani, Middle Eastern, you're part of this other group. And because there's been so many different kinds of us, we've had to learn to get along. And I'm just holding for that cultural diversity is also part of the richness of what our country is about. And it's like we need to be holding with that cultural diversity the same time we're holding for the other kinds of diversity, like food diversity or microbiome diversity. So it's maybe a little bit of a tangent, and yet
no, I kind of came to the same place when I was writing Body Thrive, where I was really just looking for straight up like research on plant diversity and diet over time with humans and health, like in exactly that. And what was interesting is what I ran right into was research on just like the number of seeds available compared, just historically compared to now in terms of the diet. So every plant has its origin in a seed. And what that brought me into was language diversity. Like there's actually a ton. Yeah. And it's paralleled, like as we're losing language diversity, and in the diversity of languages is the descriptors of the seeds. It's like very, very connected to our ecosystem diversity, right? It's very much connected to our biodiversity, our language diversity uncovers, because humans have known, like, there's like in this region of Indonesia, there's 112 grains, different seed strains of rice, and we have names for them. But as soon as we lose that language, we lose the naming, and we start to lose the seeds.
And that naming also relates to all 5 levels of who we are. I mean, like all the koshas, because it's like if we lose a name, like Dharma, say, if Dharma were to be lost, there's that word evokes so much more than just the physical. So it's like these words are precious, and the fact, part of what I'm excited about what you're doing is you're preserving a tradition that's ancient and has many seeds on many levels. And I honor that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know it's funny because I was at Podcast Movement a couple of weeks ago, and I was with all these like marketing, podcast monetization people, because they find me really fascinating. They're like, how are you growing this tribe and this impact? But like, really like, how are you making money in this, blah, blah, blah. And you're talking to them, and I would talk about Dharma, and they're like, I've never heard that word. I'm like, yes, you have. You heard Jack Kerouac and Dharma bums. Like you have heard this word, but let's unpack what it means. And they're like, well, isn't there a word in English? And I'm like, no, it's too complex.
Yeah. And it evokes so much.
Yeah. And then you start talking about it and you can see the pranic body awakening. You can see them getting like, oh, and feeling more, just that. Aligned, like that whole, okay, here's my middle. Here's my navigator. Here's how I know whether like this is on or off, whether this conversation, this project, this idea, this, right? Whether this is on or off. Like I have a Dharma detector, right? And it's what I'm finding, especially people outside the yoga community, is it's like these concepts, these just human philosophical concepts are so crucial to, increase melatonin, right? Like to enabling someone to de-stress their lives, make better decisions, simplify around a concept that's actually internal.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And knowing what our Dharma is in any given moment and acting on it is so much part of the healing. As you say, it just brings us into alignment in a way that is relieving to our nervous system, our endocrine system. And when we know we're on track, it's like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, it is. And I use it so much. Like today, we're back to school yesterday.
Yeah.
And so today, India made gymnastics team, which she's been going for a few years now. She's 9. And it's an intense training schedule. It's like 12 hours a week, plus school, plus, so she's got this fairly full life. And so last night, the conversation with my husband was like, okay, she's not getting home till 7:30. I'm like, I'm personally going to be eating at 5:30. And then I'm like, what are you doing? And like aligning that way. And then aligning to, I want to spend from when she gets home to school till when she goes to gymnastics with her and nourish her, right? So then I clear that off on my schedule. Because I'm just looking at, given these new parameters, how do I align? Part of my Dharma is Dharma as a mother and Dharma as a wife. And part of my responsibilities in our household at this point in time is the nourisher, right? Yeah. And so then I can align all that, my stress level decreases because none of that will go out of alignment. None of that will tailspin. I won't have this feeling like I should be doing this, but I'm doing that. Or I wish we were eating earlier, but because of the schedule. So I just wanted to point out that, when you say the Dharma in the moment, that we have so many roles, but it's actually quite easy to see in this phase of your life, like what are your responsibilities? What are your duties to whom? And how can you just sort of simplify and optimize your life for that?
Yeah. And that in a certain moment, you may be fully 100% there as a mom. And another moment, you're fully 100% there as a podcast, light. And another moment, it's like, okay, I'm there with my significant other, and it's okay to just let yourself focus and relax and ground within one reality at a time, whenever possible. Yeah, we were so big on multitasking to the place where sometimes I think we're multi-relationing in a way that can be hard on us.
Well, right. And then we have like the fragmentation of energy that leads to dissipation and vata imbalances. And we got to go find our black sesame seeds. So what should So my plan with Indigo is to give her some food after school. So like real food after school. And she'll have some time to digest that before going to gymnastics. And then at 7:30, like she's funny. She's learned about the Ayurvedic daily routine sort of inadvertently. And she's like, I don't want to eat a lot after I get home. And so what healing drink or nourishing tonic would you design for her in the fall? She'll have just like burned a lot of calories and whatnot. But she doesn't want to go to bed too full.
And what's her constitution?
She is Pitta Kapha.
So she's like you.
She's like me.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, of course, it's easier to think about what kind of drinks I'd want to ply her with, that I want you to ply her with when she comes home from school, that transition period.
Yeah, start there.
And like there's a cinnamon date shake, in one of the ebooks. There's an apple spice shake that I'm just making for fall. it's basically, kind of like applesauce ground up with almonds and dates, and it just ends a little bit of cinnamon. So they're all fruit nut based goodies. Those would definitely be good. The black sesame seed, you'd only do once or twice a week because that's very vata grounding, but you guys need something lighter. Mm-hmm. I might use coconut water as the base. I might see if she likes a cooling coconut green drink. My daughter goes nuts over that one. It's like you just use, it's basically, I riffed on an old chutney, it's like a Gujarati chutney where you just, instead of the shredded coconut, you use coconut water. And then you have like cilantro and a little bit of lemon, a little bit of ginger, and then as much greens as your daughter likes, So
I'm having one after this call. That sounds great.
Yeah, it is. It's like so relieving, especially, given, yeah. So that'd be one. There's also, I've got what are known as the guacamole family of smoothies, and those are based on, the idea that mole, the Mexican mole sauces are like chocolate, cinnamon, almonds, they're kind of rich and tasty, and you can put them in a drink where you grind up some almonds or some pumpkin seeds or some sunflower seeds with like 2 tablespoons of carob, some coconut water, some cinnamon. It's very nourishing. You can thin it out if she goes, wait a minute, that's too much for right now. Mm-hmm. I'll put a little bit of shankapushpi in before bedtime to calm the mind,
Yeah.
So that would be, I would think of a guacamole with a shankapushpi, it sounds a little goofy, but there's also, there's also fruit drinks. We haven't talked a lot about fruit drinks, but those can also be.
Yeah, let's talk about fruit drinks.
One that sort of blows my mind is one I'm calling papaya pleasure, papaya detox. And it's just chunks of ripe papaya blended up with a little bit of water, and then you put a tiny bit of coconut sugar in it, just a dash of cardamom. And it's a traditional Ayurvedic recipe for calming an upset stomach, or, like somebody with gastritis or reflux. And I first looked at it and I thought, no way. But I tried it one day when I was like a little, rarely, I was just went into like, oh, wait a minute, I need something. And it was like so calming. There's another way you can use papaya where you just mix it with a little water and aloe vera and turmeric. And that's like deep detox for the tissues. I originally started the Easy Healing Drinks project because I wanted to teach people about the dhatus. I felt like we were familiar with Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, but we were mining our tissues. Like we didn't understand that the dhatus existed, and so I wanted to bring that into people's awareness. And so something like this papaya detox, where it's got aloe vera and turmeric, just plain old papaya and water, and blended together. It's serious, and yet you can just feel it cleaning the tissues. And the aloe vera and the turmeric go down to every single level. It cleans all the way from the plasma down to ojas. But ojas clear, you don't clean, but the reproductive tissue. Yeah. So there can be some really simple ways you can apply these kind of ideas as a way to build ojas, clean, clear, and be happy.
I love it. And I love the idea of it's like when we're combining fruits with herbs, right? Or we're combining, nuts and seeds with herbs, and we're starting to see oh, okay, I can use these herbs to bring these nutrients in deeper and to bring them in with a certain quality that's going to have a certain effect. And what I just want to reflect on is how much that puts you in the driver's seat of designing your own body. And we look at that over time, you've got the whole rest of your life to learn the stuff, the grandmother's wisdoms that that your grandmother didn't teach you for whatever reason, or you weren't open to listening to, right? And then we can kind of reconnect, oh wow, because there's so much fear. If you think of on any of my given forums in any given week, there's something about I have just been diagnosed with osteopenia, and what can I, and I'm afraid, and this whole perspective is hey, wait, just find out about, black sesame seeds are high in calcium. Find out what different anupanas work for the osteodhatu, for the bone tissue. Get into designing your future.
Yeah. And also I really hear you saying again about connecting with the grandmothers. And sometimes one of the things I really love to do is I think of it almost as like culinary archaeology. I love to go through cookbooks. Some of them are 50, 60 years old, Some of them are just were done to, the last couple of years. And it was a different time then. People like Julia Childs could spend 2-3 hours on a recipe. Mater Joffrey, when she first started writing,
I had it.
It was like you could spend all this time, and yet now, you're lucky if you got 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and yet what you can look at is the ingredients. And so I love to check out these recipes and go, how did the grandmothers put together certain foods? And is there some simple, easy way I can do that now that still heals us, and yet I don't have to spend 3 or 4 hours on it?
Yeah.
So that can be a fun thing too in terms of empowering. And it's like, okay, you look at a cookbook and no, I'm not going to follow this recipe, but wow, check out the foods in it. Maybe I'd like to play with those and put those together in a way that works for me.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, and in Body Thrive, I spent a chapter, and I didn't know where to put it, so I just put it at the end on kitchen sadhana, and how to look at food preparation over time. So instead of looking at the next meal and how much time you have to make the next meal, right? Instead, you look at your weekly, your monthly, your seasonal perspective, and when you do that, and you use the power of soaking. The power of this sort of passive, I call it passive multitasking, right? Where I can soak some nuts and seeds in salt water overnight, and then I can drain them in the morning, and I can stick them in the dehydrator, and they'll be in there for 2 days. So so it might take me 4 days to make my crunchy nuts, but it honestly took me 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Right? And if we start to have this with I can, with my Solomon seal, I can soak it overnight in front of the full moon that's happening right now. Yes. And then it's going to pull the power in. And how long did it take to put the plant in the quart jar? It took a minute, and so to me, that's so much of this, starting to understand that multiple things are happening simultaneously with deeper nourishment. And to me, that it mirrors what's happening physiologically, that we have these different levels of absorption that are happening over time. So if we're targeting the Asti Dhatu, we got to have a 7-week commitment to an initial action happening there, right? And,
exactly.
And just getting into that time frame of okay, some things instant satisfaction, and other things they need this cumulative process.
Yeah, and similarly, giving that same kind of look at nature and at time frames. So this might sound goofy, but I let my amaranth and my lamb's quarter go to seed. Some people go, heaven forbid, you're letting the weeds go to seed. And yet I'm thinking, who knows what's going to happen in the coming years? It's those are beautiful foods that if I let some of them go to seed, they're going to be there in the next season, in the next year, just the way, you put some seeds in the refrigerator, you let it soak, and it's there for you over the next day. There's a little bit of thinking ahead for not only the next day, but also the next generation.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I want to close on that. Amen. Power to the plants, power to the people. Good. Thank you so much, Amadea.
Let me just say one thing about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And how to get a hold of me. We're working on the easy healing drinks from the wisdom of Ayurveda, nourishing and delicious recipes for all seasons. And that's going to be a print book that's coming out early next year. If somebody is interested in sneak peeks and wants ebooks, we've got 2 different ebooks. One is the warming winter book, and the other is a cooling, cleansing, and sustaining book. I created those because I wanted to create an affordable, accessible book that somebody could get anywhere on the planet. And yet the reality is that once we put out the print book, we may not be able to offer the ebooks. So I want to let people know that those ebooks are there right now.
Get them now. I have one on my hard drive. I like it there.
Exactly. Yeah. So easyhealingdrinks.com, and also there's quite a few recipes in my blogs on AmadeaMorningstar.net. And I just, it's a chance. There's chances now to be able to exchange in exciting ways that we couldn't do before the internet. And so we might as well kind of bless it and also keep it within its boundaries. And I just want to so acknowledge you for how you're skillfully working with Ayurveda and modern times in this way.
Oh, thank you. And I hope you come back real soon because I just love hanging out with you.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay.
Best wishes.
You too.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.